When I walked into the office that morning, no one greeted me, not even Eric, who used to bring me coffee every Friday after a big win. The hallway lights were dimmer than usual. The screen in the lobby still flashed. 10 years of Titan, leading the market with precision. My name wasn't on the banner. It never had been. But today, it felt deliberate. I paused in the middle of the lobby, the hum of the LED screen washing over me. Titan had hit its 10-year mark. 10 years of success, global dominance, predictive perfection. 10 years of my code humming beneath every decision that built this empire. I had been here since day one, when the servers were in the back of a storage closet, when we called it Project Atlas, before marketing stepped in and renamed it Titan. And yet now, as employees gathered around trays of catered pastries and branded cupcakes, it felt like I was just another face in the hallway. No eye contact, no head nods, just movement around me, like I'd already disappeared and no one had noticed. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe they were saving the real celebration for later. I reached my floor, expecting the usual buzz near the project team's space. Instead, the glass doors were shut, the lights inside dim. My badge still worked, but barely anyone was there. A notification blinked on my phone. Titan at 10 Live Remarks Hall, at 9:30 in the morning. It was already 9:20 in the morning. I walked quickly across the main corridor, the sound of my heels clicking like a stranger's. As I stepped into the back of the auditorium, I saw the banner stretched across the stage, celebrating a decade of disruption. And in the center of the stage, smiling behind the podium, was Natalie. Natalie, who I mentored 5 years ago. Natalie, who once cried in my office after failing her first deployment. Natalie, who once said, "If I can be even 10% of who you are, Mia, I'll make it." Now she was delivering the opening speech. I stood in the dark corner of the room, arms folded, trying to understand what I was looking at. No one mentioned I'd been replaced. No one told me anything, and for the first time in a decade, I realized I wasn't just being left out. I was being erased. The applause was still echoing in my ears as I stepped away from the auditorium's back door. I didn't know where to go, so I let my feet take me anywhere but there, somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't smell like staged celebration and polished betrayal. I ended up in the South Wing elevator, pressing the button to the 17th floor out of habit. That's where my real office had been before they moved project leadership to a shared workspace on 12. Another way of saying, you're being phased out without the headline. As the elevator opened, a new calendar alert buzzed on my phone. The title read, Executive Review 17th Floor Conference 10 o'clock sharp. Mandatory. It was already 9:57 in the morning. No explanation, no prior notice, no prep, just an order. I stepped out. The hallway was silent. Even the motion sensor lights took a second to flicker on. At the end of the corridor sat the room I knew too well. The walls had always been an unremarkable beige, a color that looked like it had been chosen to erase emotion. When I opened the door, 3 people were waiting. Not one of them smiled. Carla from HR sat stiffly, a folder already open in front of her. Next to her, a legal counsel I didn't recognize. And at the head of the table, in his signature navy suit and tight jawline, was Victor Dane, Chief Operating Officer. I hadn't seen Victor in weeks. He never bothered with engineering discussions. He had famously once said, "I don't need to understand code to know it's too expensive." Now here he was, presiding over the end of my career like it was a budget meeting. He didn't offer a seat. He just gestured to the chair opposite him and said, "Let's begin." Carla cleared her throat and began reading from a page I was not allowed to touch. Effective immediately. The role of lead AI architect has been dissolved under structural realignment. Your contributions are appreciated. That was it. One sentence for 10 years of blood. brain, and silence. No review, no feedback, no mention of Titan. I looked at Victor. He didn't blink, just folded his hands and said, "This isn't personal, Mia. The company is evolving. It's time to shift our resources to more open source innovation." My heart stilled. Open source. That was his fight for years, trying to convince the board to strip Titan's proprietary encryption and unlock its scalability. I had pushed back, fought for tight security, for accountability, for boundaries. And now he had won. By removing the last person who could say no, he wasn't just erasing me. He was claiming the system. I should have screamed. I should have thrown that beige folder across the room. But I didn't. I stood up slowly. No handshake, no words. I picked up the pen from the table, wrote "received" on the page, and walked out. Not a single person stopped me as I rode the elevator back down. I looked at my reflection in the steel doors. My jaw was clenched, my eyes dry. No tears would fall. Not for them. Outside, the wind had picked up. A storm was forecasted that afternoon. Good. Let it come, because something had already shifted inside me. They thought they'd just signed a termination. They had no idea they had just started a countdown. The walk from the building to the parking garage felt unreal. I kept checking my badge, as if part of me believed this had been a mistake and I'd still be let back in. But the gate didn't buzz anymore. My access had already been shut off. I sat in the car for nearly 20 minutes, hands still on the steering wheel, not knowing where to go, not ready to drive home, not ready to answer questions. I hadn't even told my family what today was supposed to be. Titan's 10-year anniversary. I started the engine. The dashboard clock blinked 11:06 in the morning. By 11:45, I was back in my apartment. Shoes kicked off, blazer crumpled on the couch. I moved on instinct, unpacking my laptop, plugging it into the docking station, and opening the terminal window. Old habits. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe a sense of closure. Maybe the last glimpse of something I'd built. I wasn't going to sabotage anything. That was never my way. I just wanted to disconnect cleanly. A digital goodbye. I opened the system admin panel for my encrypted workspace, still active. I blinked. Surely. They had revoked access by now. Revoking credentials was standard. Protocol. But everything looked normal. No lockouts. No password resets. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Stiff. I clicked deeper. Titan's core API authentication protocol. The same one I had written nearly a decade ago. Layered in 3 levels of encryption. Rotated every 30 days. It required a token that only I could generate. A custom private key embedded in a physical signature device stored in a secured cloud. And that key was still tethered to my account. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, my mouth slightly open. The air felt thinner somehow. I refreshed the page. No change. My account still held ownership of the heartbeat token. It was a hidden failsafe. Back then, the board insisted Titan remain proprietary, untouchable, and secure. They had signed off on a security design that required a manual, original authenticator key to validate the system every 30 days, a digital heartbeat. If that signal stopped, Titan would lock itself down, gradually, silently, then completely. It was designed for defense, for trust, for integrity, and they had forgotten. They had fired me and left the only living switch untouched. I looked down at my hands. How had they missed this? How had Victor, so obsessed with dismantling my control, let this piece slip? I checked the system logs. The last key validation had been 19 days ago. That meant there were 11 days left before the next token was required. I stood slowly, still staring at the screen, then walked to the window. The city buzzed outside like it always did, unaware that a billion-dollar system had just been left exposed. I wasn't angry in that moment. Not exactly. I wasn't smiling either. I was stunned, not because I still had control, but because they had erased me without understanding the system I had built. They thought they had fired me. They didn't realize. Titan still thought I was in charge. It was late afternoon when the numbness began to wear off. I hadn't eaten. I had barely moved from the chair by the window. The city kept humming outside like nothing had changed. But something inside me had shifted. Not broken. No. Something sharper than that. Something solid and heavy that lodged itself in my chest. I opened my laptop again, not to code, not to verify the key, just to breathe in something familiar, without thinking. I opened LinkedIn. At first, it was muscle memory. I scrolled past tech headlines, congratulatory promotions, the usual stream of egos dressed as inspiration, and then I saw it. A new post from Natalie Lane. Honored to step into the role of Head of Predictive AI, Titan Division at Oriza Tech. Grateful to the leadership team for believing in me. My stomach twisted. There it was, in bold, public, proud, Natalie, who used to knock softly on my office door every time she broke a loop or crashed a model. Natalie, who once brought me chamomile tea at midnight during a week-long product rollout. Natalie, who sat across from me on the floor of the server room, shoes off, humming to herself while we debugged line after line until dawn. I had watched her grow. She had called me her mentor, her role model, even her career anchor. And now, she had stepped into the role Titan was built around, my role. No message, no warning, not even a text to say, "I'm sorry." Just a shiny post, full of buzzwords and emojis and 100 likes. I didn't realize I had stood up until I heard the chair scrape back. I walked slowly to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and stood there staring at a spoon for no reason at all. The anger wasn't explosive. It didn't come in screams or fists. It came like heat rising just beneath my skin, controlled, contained, but ready. I didn't blame her entirely, not yet. She was young, ambitious, and maybe, just maybe, she had been told I had stepped down voluntarily, that I was exploring new opportunities. That's how corporate rewrites betrayal. They dress it in fake gratitude and phrases no one questions. But still, she hadn't asked. She hadn't even reached out. And that silence, that choice, was what cut deepest. I returned to my laptop and reread her post. The comments made it worse. Perfect choice. Well deserved. Natalie. Can't wait to see where you take Titan next. I scrolled through the list of names. Some of them had been on my team. People I had interviewed, trained, defended. And now? Now they were rallying around a replacement like I had never existed. Like I had been upgraded. There was one comment that stopped me cold. It was from Victor. Leadership is earned. This is what growth looks like. I read it 3 times. Then again. My hand was trembling slightly as I closed the tab. This wasn't just a promotion for Natalie. This was a message, a declaration. They hadn't just removed me. They had replaced me with someone they believed could be molded. Someone who wouldn't question protocol, or security, or ethics. Someone who didn't write kill switches into her code. I returned to the terminal window. The authentication timer now read, 10 days remaining. I stared at the numbers, letting them settle in my mind, like grains of sand dropping one by one through an hourglass no one else could see. I could feel it now, this quiet, boiling thing growing inside me. I wasn't planning revenge, not yet, but something had cracked. And what leaked through that fracture wasn't sadness or loss. It was something far colder, far more patient, something that knew exactly how many days were left, and exactly who would feel it first. I didn't expect to see the email. It wasn't meant for me. It came as a forwarded message from Ashwin, a junior dev I had once mentored briefly. The subject line read, FW, Press Kit, Titan Anniversary Interview, Embargoed. At first, I assumed it had been sent by mistake. Then I read the opening line. To celebrate a decade of transformative innovation, Ariza Tech sat down with Victor Dane, the visionary leader behind Titan's evolution. I froze. I reread it twice, hoping I'd misunderstood. I hadn't. Victor, visionary leader behind Titan? The article was clearly a PR piece prepared for media release, a glowing internal feature wrapped in buzzwords and carefully orchestrated praise. Photos of Victor at a glass conference table. Victor in front of a digital schematic of Titan. Victor shaking hands with the CTO in a staged moment of collaboration. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not in the design. Not in the founding. Not in the early development years. No special thanks. No footnote. Nothing. The headline itself made my stomach twist. 10 years of Titan, a system built on scale, strategy, and the sharp eye of COO Victor Dane. I scrolled quickly, hoping for a quote, anything that hinted at my role. But all I found were Victor's polished sound bites. We knew from day one that proprietary systems had limitations. Titan had to be more than just code. It had to be scalable, transparent, global. Leadership is about seeing 5 moves ahead. Titan's journey was shaped by those long-term visions. I had written the first line of Titan's code on a napkin in a backroom server closet. I had trained its first iteration using mock data I collected myself from 4 different platforms. I had stayed through every crash, every investor pitch, every version rollout, while Victor had been too busy booking leadership summits in Aspen. But now, he was the architect. I was no one. The erasure wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. It was strategic. It was personal. I stepped away from my screen, the walls of my apartment closing in around me. The soft hum of my monitor suddenly sounded too loud. My apartment plants, once a little haven, looked unfamiliar. Even the sweater I had been wearing felt wrong on my skin. I checked the timestamp. The article had been finalized 2 weeks ago, so while I was still showing up to work, while I was leading the final upgrade to Titan's demand predictor, they were preparing to cut me out of the narrative entirely. And they succeeded. The comments under the email thread made it worse. Beautiful piece. Victor is such a force. Finally, someone highlighting real leadership. Let's get this to Forbes next quarter. I didn't even feel angry yet. I felt airless, like I had been unmade, like the thing I had spent a decade pouring myself into had detached itself and moved on without me, rewritten by people who didn't bleed for it, who didn't know what it cost. I thought back to a moment. Years ago, when Titan had failed for the first time, we had just launched version 2.3, and a bug had caused a $2 million misfire on the East Coast market. I had taken full responsibility. I had stayed up 3 days straight, fixing the anomaly, rewriting the logic in a sleepless trance with nothing but electrolyte powder and a busted space heater to keep me alive. Victor had never even acknowledged the patch. Now, he was standing in front of a camera, smiling like he had written it himself. I picked up my phone, opened Natalie's chat thread, and hovered over the keyboard. My last message to her had been 3 weeks ago, when I had texted, "You crushed that predictive demo. So proud." She never replied. I put the phone down. There was no one left to text, no one to message. I had been erased not just from the system, but from the people I had given everything to. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had felt since the day I walked out. But in that silence, something stirred. A reminder. The system might no longer carry my name, but it still carried my code. And the timer, 9 days remaining, was still counting down. It happened on a Thursday. Rain hammered the windows, like the sky had lost its patience. I was curled up on the couch with a blanket and a half-eaten bowl of soup. Background noise from a podcast murmuring something forgettable. I hadn't opened my laptop all day. I didn't need to. I knew the countdown was still ticking. 9 days, 18 hours, 47 minutes. Then my phone rang. Not a message, not a robocall, a real number. Flashing across the screen, Caleb Ruiz. I hadn't heard that name in a year. Caleb used to be one of the only engineers who actually understood the deeper logic architecture of Titan. We had built the anomaly reconciliation loop together. Late nights, scratch paper, caffeine crashes. He left the company when Titan went corporate. When layers of compliance started replacing innovation. I thought he'd moved on, but now he was calling. I let it ring twice, then 3 more times. Something in my gut told me to answer. Not for help, for curiosity. "Caleb," I said, pulling the phone to my ear. He didn't waste time. "Did you see it?" "See what?" "Titan. It misfired." I sat up. Define misfired. It triggered a mass sell on the renewable index before the regional tax bill passed. 18 hours too early. The board's losing it. PR's on fire. We've already lost close to 8 million. My lips parted. But no words came. 8 million. Titan hadn't missed a major trade window in over 7 years. "That doesn't sound like Titan," I said. Tone even. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. Not unless someone's tampered with the sequencing, or..." He paused. I stayed silent. "Or the logic has started to unravel." I could almost hear the unspoken sentence that followed, "or the authentication protocol is missing." But Caleb didn't accuse me. He was smarter than that. He knew I didn't do revenge. I didn't have to. "What are they saying internally?" I asked. "They're scrambling. Victor's blaming the data pipeline team. The new predictive lead, Natalie. She's been pulled into back-to-back calls." Her name landed like a dull echo. I pictured her in that glass-walled conference room, trying to explain something she never truly built. I didn't ask more. I didn't offer help. "Thanks for the heads up," I said quietly, then ended the call. I set the phone down, walked to my desk, and opened the laptop. The screen hummed to life with a soft click. Terminal booted automatically. I typed in a single command, more out of muscle memory than purpose. Token status, active next signal, due, 9 days remaining. Ownership, M. Torres. My finger hovered over the power key. Everything was still in place. They hadn't found the root-level dependency. They hadn't overridden the call signature. They were running a billion-dollar AI system on a forgotten heartbeat, and it was beginning to skip. A smirk tugged at the corner of my mouth. I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. I just felt right. They had rewritten the past, erased my name, called Victor the brain, called Natalie the future, but the code remembered. The code still answered to me. I clicked a few windows deeper into the anomaly logs. There it was. The cell signal had been triggered prematurely due to a recursive skip in the confirmation loop. The authentication protocol had timed out briefly, just for 6 seconds, but enough to confuse the model's confidence scoring. Titan had second-guessed itself. Without the signature refresh, it was beginning to hesitate, and that hesitation had cost them $8 million? I stared at the blinking cursor and let the weight of it settle in. They built a throne on my system, then turned their back on the one person who kept the foundation solid. Now it was tilting, slowly, silently, and I didn't have to do a thing. I exited the logs, closed the terminal, and shut the lid with a soft click. No need to fix anything. No need to warn anyone. Let them debug. Let them guess. Let them call in consultants and chase data ghosts. Let them taste fear. For 7 years, Titan had been perfect. Now it would make just enough mistakes to unravel the illusion. Not sabotage, just silence. And in that silence, I would watch them start to panic, one line of broken logic at a time. The second glitch had hit by Saturday morning. I didn't need a call to know. I saw it in the markets. The system was hesitating again, misfiring on microtrades, pulling back on high-confidence buys, and in one baffling move, had delayed a bulk trigger for a Chinese energy contract until after the window closed. That one had cost them nearly $4 million. I was at a small cafe near Midtown, sipping a lukewarm matcha, watching two pigeons argue over a French fry near my table. The screen of my laptop reflected calm, but behind the brightness, lines of code were looping in my mind like music only I could hear. Across from me, an empty chair, beside it, a leather notebook I'd been sketching in for days, quiet diagrams of a new framework, clean, decentralized, encrypted with actual ethics built into the AI's predictive spine. It wasn't revenge. It was rebirth. That's when I got the message. They're trying to restructure the Titan architecture. Level 1 access rejected. Level 2 rejected. Everyone's freaking out. See? Caleb again. Short, direct. I didn't respond. 15 minutes later. A second message. Victor is tearing through the data team. He's demanding 24/7 ops until it's fixed. You okay? I turned my phone screen face down. I was more than okay, because I knew exactly what was happening. Back when Titan was just a prototype, we built a command structure with 3 control rings. Level 1 for analysts, Level 2 for senior engineers. Level 3, the architecture ring, was hard-coded to one encrypted signature. Mine. Victor had argued against it at the time. Too centralized, he said. Too much power for one person. I had countered. That's the point. It's a firewall. Titan doesn't get to evolve unless it trusts the one who built its core logic. Eventually, after a series of security breaches hit other firms, the board relented. My signature was bound to the system itself. But now, they had forgotten, or worse, assumed they had found a workaround. Victor had greenlit a full architectural restructure to increase transparency and speed. Translation: rip out my design and replace it with something modular, something controllable. Only they couldn't access the foundation, because I never gave them the key. By noon, I heard from someone I hadn't expected. Natalie. She messaged me through a private channel we hadn't used in 2 years. The first line was hesitant. Hey, I don't know if this is okay, but we're locked out of the logic spine. I think it's still tethered to you. Still tethered. The phrasing felt strange, like she didn't want to say the truth out loud. I didn't answer immediately. I let it sit there. She'd know I'd seen it. I imagined the situation. Victor pacing in circles, red-faced. The IT team exhausted, digging through sand. Natalie caught in the middle, her name suddenly attached to a system she couldn't command. And me. I was in control, not loud, not official, but total. I was the only one with the signature Titan still recognized. They could debug all day. They could hire every consultant in the city. But without that one line of trust, burned into the original launch protocol, they would never reach the root. I flipped open the notebook beside me and turned to a blank page. I titled it, Athena Project, Core Assumptions. Then I started writing. No one owns the algorithm. The system learns with integrity, not greed. Every layer should be traceable, reversible, and explainable. No dependence on a single key, only on shared ethical alignment. It was a different kind of architecture, one meant to heal instead of dominate. Behind me, someone bumped a chair. I barely noticed. I was too deep in the world I was building, the world where power didn't have to corrupt. But right now, I still held that power, not because I stole it, not because I demanded it, because I built something that trusted me more than the people who stole my title. Victor thought Titan could be repurposed. He didn't understand. Titan wasn't just locked. Titan had chosen not to open for anyone else, and that choice was mine to leave untouched. By day 25, the cracks were no longer subtle. Titan's third misfire had just hit the southeast grid, causing a staggered failure in predictive load balancing. The company's energy clients were furious. Legal teams were activated, reports leaked, analysts speculated everything from sabotage to quantum instability. But I wasn't reading the news. I was rereading an email. It had arrived at 5:07 in the morning, encrypted, masked, routed through a private relay I hadn't seen in years. The sender's name wasn't listed, but the signature was impossible to fake. Gerald Langford, board member, legacy investor, quiet puppet master of Erisatech's internal decisions. He was the type of man who didn't sit in meetings. He owned the meeting table. His message was short, formal, but laced with urgency beneath its polished tone. Ms. Torres, I hope this message finds you in good health. We find ourselves in a uniquely fragile situation. Titan is experiencing integrity delays in core functions, resulting in reputational risk and client attrition. We believe you are in a position to resolve this quietly and expediently. We are prepared to offer a one-time private contract, 6 figures, discretionary, no strings, for you to issue a single signature validation to restore operational flow. One time, no visibility, clean exit. Hi, he closed with, we are confident you will see the mutual benefit. G.L. I didn't laugh, but I did smile. It wasn't the amount. It wasn't even the offer itself. It was the assumption that I could be purchased, as if all this had been a negotiating tactic, as if I had held back for leverage, as if I hadn't already decided what Titan's silence meant. I sat at my desk, the city still dark behind the windows, and watched the cursor blink at the end of his message. 6 figures, for 10 seconds of code. But it wasn't about code. It was about control. This was the first time someone in power had acknowledged, even implicitly, that I still mattered. That behind the titles, the reshuffled teams, the glossy headlines about Victor's vision, I was the one holding the circuit together. They didn't dare say it publicly, but privately, they knew. And Gerald Langford didn't email engineers. He emailed architects. I leaned back in my chair, let the silence stretch, and pictured Gerald pacing in some corner office high above the city, polished shoes tapping real oak flooring, expensive watch ticking louder by the second. He wanted control restored. He didn't care who built it, only who could restart it. I opened a blank reply window, took a breath, typed, I don't send keys. I send messages. This is one. Then I hit send. No follow-up came. Not that day, but I knew it landed. Because within 3 hours, Erisatech issued a quiet update to their investors. Titan experiencing temporary learning rate drift. System recalibration in progress. Recalibration. That was a clever word. What they didn't say, the system was rejecting overrides. The board was panicking behind closed doors, and Gerald Langford's offer had been met with quiet defiance from someone who no longer belonged to them. Around noon, I returned to the cafe I'd made my second home. Same table, same blank notebook, same bartender who never asked questions. I wrote one word at the top of the page. Sovereignty, below it. I mapped out the early infrastructure for Athena, my next project, a platform no one could own, only partner with, a system that would never require a single key again, one designed not to control but to liberate. I had built Titan inside a cage. Now, I was designing its opposite, and still, while they spun in chaos, begged for my signature, drafted legal backdoors. I drank my tea, watched pigeons outside the glass, and felt no rage, just quiet, earned satisfaction. They thought my silence meant indecision, but my silence was a message, and the longer I said nothing, the louder it echoed. The voice message came just after 7:01 in the evening. I almost didn't see it. I had been outside all afternoon, walking without purpose through the park, the November air crisp and cutting. When I got back, I left my phone face down on the table beside my keys. No vibration, no alert, just a red dot waiting for me hours later, buried inside an old encrypted chat thread I hadn't opened in years. Natalie Lane, My thumb hovered over the notification for a long moment. I didn't want to hear her voice, but I tapped play anyway. There was a shaky inhale before the words came. Her voice, once so polished, so chirpy in meetings, was raw, frayed like thread coming undone. Mia, I don't know if you'll even listen to this. I don't know who else to talk to. She sniffled. They told me you left. Voluntarily. That you had a sabbatical planned. That you were burned out. A beat of silence. I believed them. I wanted to. Because if it were true, I wouldn't have to question what I'd just agreed to. The speech. The promotion. All of it. Her voice cracked. I didn't know they erased you. I paused the message. Chest tight. No one had ever said those words out loud before. They erased you. I resumed the playback. Victor said you were holding back Titan, that the encryption you insisted on was slowing innovation. He said you'd become uncooperative, defensive. I wanted to think he was wrong, but I didn't say anything. I stood there in that auditorium, looking at the crowd while reading off a script I didn't write. They clapped for me. They took photos, and all I could think was, she should be here. The words came faster now, her breathing jagged. I'm not ready for this role. Titan is unraveling. Mia, every update is getting messier. The models are fragmenting. Confidence scores are dropping in sectors that used to run clean. I keep waking up at night. I dream about the server room, the smell of burnt plastic and stale coffee, you explaining syntax to me like it was poetry. And I wake up, ashamed. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They used me. I closed my eyes. I could still remember the night Natalie stayed late on her second week, terrified of breaking the code base. I had ordered takeout and sat beside her on the cold floor while we rebuilt a corrupted decision tree from scratch. She called me the firewall back then, said I made her feel safe, and now she was crying in the dark, asking for that firewall back. Please, she whispered, almost inaudible. If there's anything you can do, they're collapsing, Mia, and they won't admit it, but they need you. I need you. The message ended. I sat in the dim light of my apartment, staring at the static silence left behind. Part of me wanted to throw the phone. Another part just felt hollow. There had been a time I would have answered instantly, rushed in, saved the system, protected her. But that version of me, the one who gave without boundaries, was gone. Still. Hearing her say those things, something in me broke again. Not the angry kind of break. The kind that happens when someone you once believed in confesses too late. I didn't respond. Not that night, not the next day. The message sat there, unopened again, unread. Its little check marks still waiting for confirmation. I reopened my laptop, pulled up the Athena project. I rewrote a section of the ethics layer. Forgiveness should not require forgetting. Then I stared at the line for a long time, hands motionless on the keyboard. I thought about Natalie's tears, her voice, her fear, and I thought about mine, silent, invisible, ignored. The timer on Titan ticked quietly behind everything. 5 days remaining. And for once, I didn't feel like the victim. I didn't even feel like the villain. I felt like the only person who still remembered how this all began. And maybe, how it should end. At 7:45 in the morning, Mia Torres was already awake. She hadn't needed an alarm. Her body knew. Her mind had been counting down since the first day of silence. She wrapped her hands around a ceramic mug. Chamomile tea this time. Not coffee. Her apartment was filled with warm, amber light, filtering in through slatted blinds. On the windowsill sat her closed laptop, untouched since the night before. Screen black, quiet, waiting, no music, no news, just peace, and behind that stillness, A line of code buried 10 years deep was about to complete its final loop, across the city, inside Orizatek's steel and glass tower. The office lights were already blazing. On floor 17, the system's response team was running diagnostics for the third morning in a row, sleep-deprived, huddled around screens. They had been chasing phantom bugs for days. Caleb Ruiz sat quietly at his desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard, reviewing anomaly patterns in silence. He knew something was wrong, but every logical route ended in a dead end. Titan wasn't being sabotaged. It was withdrawing. At 7:58, he glanced at the digital clock mounted above the server racks. His breath hitched. 3 minutes, he whispered. No one responded. They all knew what he meant. Mia stepped out onto her balcony, barefoot on the cold cement, feeling the crisp morning air wrap around her skin. She looked out over the skyline, faint fog curling between the buildings, the edges of the sun cresting behind concrete. It was almost time. She didn't open the laptop. She didn't need to. The system had already been given its orders. At 8:01, Victor Dane stormed into conference room Delta, slamming his phone on the table. Why is the dashboard frozen? No one could answer. He turned to Natalie, whose hands were trembling as she flipped through her notes. It's not the interface, she whispered. It's the engine. Mia took a slow sip. This wasn't revenge. Not anymore. That would have required anger. This was release. This was the removal of weight that had been pressing on her shoulders for a decade. She had loved Titan once. Not the name, not the brand, the code, the design, the possibility, but they had turned it into something else. A tool for control, for profit. They erased her name from the history, but they couldn't erase the fingerprint she had left on its pulse. And now, that pulse was about to stop. At 8:02 in the morning, Titan's authentication protocol ran its final check. No signal received. System integrity failed. Shutdown sequence initiated. At first, nothing obvious happened. The screens didn't go black. No sirens. Just freezing, like a heartbeat that forgot how to continue. In infrastructure, Dev Patel stood up and yelled across the room. We lost access to the logic spine. Across 5 departments, error messages stacked like dominoes, permissions revoked, processes aborted, data threads cut off midstream. Titan didn't crash. It simply disengaged. Because that's what Mia had written it to do. Meanwhile, on Mia's balcony, the sky bloomed with soft gold. She leaned against the railing, face lifted toward the warmth, eyes closed. No noise, no headlines, no applause. Just her, the architect, no longer the guardian of someone else's empire. She opened her eyes and looked down at the street, just people walking, birds gathering around a bakery cart, life moving forward. She smiled. Back in the tower, Victor barked orders into his phone, demanding someone restore core control now. But every team gave the same answer. There's no override. No. There's no key. We can't even reach the source signature. And for the first time since Mia's departure, the board began to whisper behind closed doors. What if she never left anything behind? What if they had burned the bridge and now stood on the wrong side of the fire? By 8:07. Natalie sat alone in the break room, holding her phone. Mia's voice message thread still open, but unanswered. She didn't try to call again. She just stared at the blinking error icon on her dashboard, and finally understood what it meant. Inside her apartment, Mia returned to her desk and opened the Athena project file. She typed a single new line of code beneath the ethics protocol. This system does not serve ownership. It serves trust. Then she leaned back, took one last sip of tea, and closed the lid of her laptop. For the first time in 10 years, Mia Torres was no longer watching over anyone, and it felt like the first real breath she'd taken in years. The call came at 9:03 in the morning. I was slicing a pear in the kitchen when my phone lit up. Unknown number, U.S. Corporate line. I stared at it, then reached over and pressed the speaker button with the edge of my knife. I didn't speak first. The silence on the other end crackled with something raw and unfamiliar. Then, Mia! I recognized the voice instantly. It used to carry boardrooms. It used to dictate budget cuts, strategic pivots, executive firings with the calm precision of a machine. Now, it wavered. Mia, it's Anthony. Anthony Cross, CEO of Orza Tech. I know, I said flatly. Another beat of silence. I could almost hear him swallowing his pride. It must have taken him a full day to work up the nerve. Maybe longer. I know you're aware of what's happened. Titan's offline. Completely. Yes, I said. That tends to happen when you fire the one person who kept it breathing. I didn't know, he said. I swear to you, Mia, I was misled. He said it like a man drowning, like someone hoping confession might buy him oxygen. You let Victor lead the restructure, I said. You signed off on every initiative that stripped my name off the system and replaced it with words like scalability and shareholder alignment. That wasn't me, at least. Not entirely. Victor had influence, a lot of it. I raised an eyebrow. In other words, I said, you were there. You just didn't fight. He didn't deny it. I could picture him now, probably pacing his glass office. Tie loosened, jacket off. Top floor silence broken only by his own unraveling breath. We're prepared to make this right, he said, voice low. We'll reinstate your name, your title, compensation, back pay plus equity. We'll bring you in as chief architect. No oversight. I stared at the pear in my hand. Cut clean. Perfect symmetry. I could have taken the offer. Could have walked back in and named my price. Could have stood at the front of that sinking ship and held the wheel while they tried to right themselves. But that would have meant going back. Back to the place that threw me out with no warning, no dignity, and no regard for the work I had poured into its foundation. Let me be clear, Anthony said, trying to sound like the man he used to be. This isn't about ego. It's about survival. We need you. I finally picked up the phone and brought it to my ear. You only need me, I said, because you never bothered to understand what I built. You let the wrong man gut it from the inside. And now that it's bleeding, you want the original surgeon back to stitch it up. I'm trying to fix this. No, I said. You're trying to keep your job. He was quiet for several seconds. And then, softer, what would it take? I thought about that. Not seriously, but long enough to let him wonder if there was a number, if there was a clause, a caveat, a key. Then I gave him the only truth that mattered. When you treated me like open source code, I said, voice cool and steady, the system made a choice. He hesitated. What choice? To self-destruct. A long breath crackled through the line. He had nothing left to say, and neither did I. So I hung up. I set the phone down gently on the counter and exhaled, letting the air out slowly. It wasn't rage anymore. It wasn't grief. It was clarity, across town. He was probably staring at the phone, unsure if I would call back, hoping, praying, wondering if I'd change my mind. I wouldn't. He hadn't called to apologize. He had called because he lost control. And the truth is, he never had it. I walked to the living room, opened the Athena project again, and scrolled down to a section I hadn't touched yet. Governance. I added one line. Leadership built on convenience always fails in crisis. I looked out the window as the sun climbed higher. Orza Tech was burning quietly behind mirrored glass, and I was free. I didn't set an alarm. By the time the sun crept over the ridgeline outside my window, I was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the balcony of a quiet flat in Lutry, Switzerland. There was a lake below me, calm and steady, reflecting the snowcaps like they belonged to a different world. A world without noise, without ownership, without code built to control. The air was cold, but my tea was warm. I wrapped both hands around the ceramic mug and just listened. No pings, no emails, no crisis, just the sound of birds and the quiet rhythm of freedom. It had been exactly 4 months since Titan shut itself down. Since then, Ariza Tech had crumbled in slow motion, stock down, clients bailing, articles swirling with buzzwords they didn't understand, core logic failure, authenticator loss, architectural breach, but no one ever said my name. That was the part that made me smile the most. They still didn't get it. It wasn't about me being missing. It was about them never understanding what they had. The project I'm working on now is called Leora. She's not a product. She's a philosophy written in lines of ethical AI. Open, traceable, self-regulating, no buried keys, no one-person fail-safes, no shareholders shouting from behind smoked glass, just systems that earn trust and lose access when they stop deserving it. I built the core design over the last few months with the help of someone who reached out when I thought I had disappeared for good. His name is Aurelien. He was a client once, years ago, before Orizatech bought out the contract that powered his energy platform and turned his team into pawns. He left quietly, built his own path. When he found out what happened, he emailed me 3 words: "Still believe in you." No contracts, no pressure, just support and funding. Sometimes the right people don't show up until everyone else has walked away. This morning, while checking node logs, I glanced at the newsfeed humming quietly on a side screen. Orizatech declares emergency restructuring after Titan failure. Former CEO Anthony Cross steps down following shareholder revolt audit. Confirms no recovery path for Titan framework. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. That chapter had ended exactly how it was meant to. No explosion, no courtroom drama, just silence, quiet decay, and all because I chose not to press the button. At 10:03, Leah arrived. She's a systems student from the local university, brilliant in a way I recognize instantly. She reminds me of myself at 23. Except softer, and less inclined to hide behind firewalls. We sit at the dining table, side by side, both watching as Leora spins out her first real-time query analysis. It works, flawlessly, and this time, I don't hold my breath waiting for someone to take credit. Leah turns to me and says, "You didn't just build an AI, you built a conscience." I nod but say nothing, because she's right, and because I don't need to be quoted anymore. We break for lunch, and I return to the balcony alone. The wind brushes my hair gently, and for the first time in over a decade, I don't feel like I'm holding up the sky. Titan was never supposed to last forever. It was built for a different world, a world that failed to deserve it. But Leora, she belongs to this one, to the world that rises from the wreckage, the one we shape with quieter hands, wiser minds. I open my laptop again and type a new line at the top of the ethics protocol. Only give the signal to those who have earned the silence behind it. And I press enter. If you've ever built something only to be forgotten by the people who needed you most, this story is yours. If you've ever walked away from the noise, just to rediscover your own voice, leave a comment. Share this with someone who deserves their own kind of freedom. And if this journey felt like yours, subscribe, sometimes. The most powerful thing we can do is choose where to send the next signal.